Hello everybody, my name is Kat and welcome back to my channel where we talk about all things horror. And today I will be giving my thoughts on Cuckoo. This is the latest Neon distributed horror film coming off the coattails of their huge success with Longlegs just last month. This is a film directed by Tilman Singer, who admittedly is a filmmaker that I did not know much about going into this film. I feel like we've been getting the trailers for this movie since forever. I think initially this was supposed to be released in May, but then they pushed it back to August. But I feel like we've been seeing the trailers for it since January, and the trailers had a very otherworldly feel to it, right? I mean, obviously you have like Hunter Schafer in there, you have Dan Stevens. Everything was just so weird, and it was one of those things where it was like, I have no idea what this movie is about or how any of these characters are connected together. So I was really excited to finally be able to sit down and watch this and see like what the hell this movie was actually about. So would I recommend Cuckoo? So here's the thing, this is like one of those movies where I feel like it's going to be a bit divisive. I saw the movie last night on a Thursday and I went on like Reddit just to kind of see what people were saying about it. And this is just a very like small sample of people that I was looking at, but already I could tell that there was like a handful of people that really loved this movie a lot, and then there were a handful of people that were like, what the hell was this? I just wasted 2 hours of my life. I think the way that this film is set up, this is going to be another film in the vein of something like a Longlegs, or something like, this has similar vibes to like an A24 horror film, right? Like an Ari Aster film. Also had a little bit of like Yorgos Lanthimos in there, right? Kind of like Killing of a Sacred Deer type feel to it. Once again, we're seeing horror being used as a metaphor for things like grief, trauma. It is highly stylized, right? Really great cinematography, a lot of moodiness to it. You have sprinkles of dark humor here and there. And overall, you're being put in this very strange environment where weird things are happening and you're not really getting a very clear explanation as to why these things are happening. I feel like by this point in time, like, we know these kind of movies. I guess you could categorize them as like the artsy indie horror films. So I would say if you are someone that typically you do like these kinds of movies, then I think you'll really enjoy Cuckoo. If you're somebody that like you tend to be on the fence with these kinds of movies, or maybe sometimes they work for you, sometimes they don't, the best thing that I can say would be probably go look at other reviewers and kind of see what the general consensus is that people are saying about this. If you are interested in seeing it in a theater, then maybe go to like a matinee showing or go to one of those like discounted like Tuesday screenings. I'll say this, as far as like the Neon releases this year, I did enjoy Cuckoo a lot more than Longlegs. That being said, I do feel like this film suffered from some of the same problems that Longlegs had. The story is a bit muddled at times. There's not like clear character motivations, especially on the part of the antagonist. And I think for some people, like the third act is gonna seem like a bit of a letdown or maybe like anticlimactic. Overall, I would probably give this like 6.8 out of 10, maybe even like a 7 out of 10. I enjoyed it. There was a lot of things in this movie that I think work really well. But again, I just kind of feel like the narrative wasn't quite at the same level as like the acting in the film or a lot of the stylistic elements of the movie. But let's talk about like the positives and what did work here. I think the biggest strength of this film is in its lead actors, right? Hunter Schafer and Dan Stevens are definitely the standouts of this film, both giving like really great performances and giving very like different performances as well, which was fun to watch. On the one hand, you have Hunter Schafer, who is just this young teenage girl, again, dealing with grief, dealing with like depression. She's with her dad and her stepsister and her stepmom for the summer in this weird like German vacation retreat, very much playing like, you know, the only normal character really in this movie, right? She's the character that's coming in and kind of looking at everything and asking the others like, do you really not see all the weird shit happening here? No, it's just me? Okay.
That's a fucking weird way to put it.
So that very much endears you to her character. On the other hand, you have Dan Stevens, who is just kind of giving this, I don't want to say over the top, maybe a little campy. He's playing this like German scientist who owns this vacation retreat and is at the head of all of the weirdness that is going on in this location. He puts on this great like German accent. Like, I have to say, I've really been loving seeing Dan Stevens in these horror films, first in Abigail and now in this film. And both both films giving very like distinct performances, putting on very different like accents, personas. Like I just really enjoy seeing him on screen. At times like he comes in and he's very like charming and very like almost seductive, but then there are other times where he's very like sinister and just creepy, and then there's other times where he is leaning more into the comedic side of this role and very much being the kind of comic relief and adding some levity to the scene as well. There are several points in this film where his character takes out this like wooden flute and just starts playing it, and every time he does it, it is just so like majestic. I just love this. I love the scenes of him just like playing this like tiny little flute. It was amazing. So he's giving us a very layered character here, and that's what makes his performance so interesting to watch. And again, it's a really nice contrast to Hunter Schafer, who again is just this like normal teenage girl that is like, what the hell has my family gotten me into? And just to praise Hunter Schafer more, first of all, it was really nice to see her in something that wasn't Euphoria. I liked the first season of Euphoria, and then the second season, but she gives a lot of really great range in this film as well. There are several scenes where she is just crying, she's upset, and like it was so heart-wrenching to watch. Like she does such a good job of really making you feel for her character. There's a relationship that she has with her stepsister where it's like at the beginning it's not that great. She's very like standoffish. Again, I think the stepsister very much representing like the fact that her dad has moved on to this new relationship, has moved on to this new family. She very much feels like the outcast here. She just lost her mother. So there's a lot of animosity towards the stepsister at first, but then as she goes on the journey of this film, she very much learns to connect with her stepsister. And being able to just see that connection, that relationship is definitely one of the strengths of this film. Again, it just added this kind of heartwarming layer to the story that I was not expecting going into it. Definitely helped ground the film, so I appreciated that element of it. Also, I don't know, but I just kind of like enjoyed her look in this film. Like she's very beat up for most of this movie, but she plays with it so well. She has like the bandage on her head, she's got her arm in this like weird like mechanical sling looking thing, and it works because it's like on the one hand, like yes, it does make her definitely more vulnerable in the sense that she does have a head injury. Her mobility is now lacking, right? So that definitely heightens the tension in that sense, that we have a character that is in a very physical, vulnerable position. But I don't know, there was just something about like the look of it with her jacket and like her shorts. Like to me, she just looked so cool throughout the entire movie, and I feel like that's a look that we just don't often see, especially with like female protagonists in horror films. And I do like that the film also sets up at the beginning that she is a musician, right? She really loves music. Music does play a role later on in the film, so I thought that was a really good setup and payoff. If anything, I maybe wish they had pushed it a bit more. They do set up at the beginning that her character is a singer. I would have liked to have seen the film kind of bring in that element somehow at the end, maybe find a way for her to use her singing, for her to use her talent to kind of help her get out of this situation that she's in. As far as the horror in this film goes, again, I don't want to give like too much away here, but there is a entity that is running around, and you do see them briefly in the trailers. Overall, I found we'll just refer to it as the monster. There were definitely parts where I found them very creepy. There are definitely parts where you have this entity that's like creeping up on the characters. There's a lot of weird stuff going on with their face and the movements. There were also other parts, mainly again towards the end, where they kind of started to lose me a little bit in terms of like the creepiness. But you know, I'm someone that's been watching like horror films my whole life. I'm very desensitized at this point. There's not a lot in terms of like gore or blood or just like kind of graphicness on screen. Like in that sense, it's actually a very tame movie. It's one of these movies that's much more interested in being unsettling on a just like, I guess, cerebral playing field, right? It's much more interested in like the psychological aspects. It's much more interested in just kind of building this universe of like dread. Tilman Singer does do this one technique in the film that I thought was really creative and I really enjoyed, where there are these moments where the film plays with time. And the only way that I can describe it without spoiling anything is that it just had this like nightmarish quality to it, or this kind of like surreal aspect to it. Like, you know when you have like dreams and you're in the middle of the dream and it's like you're trying to do something, but like you can't like actually do the thing that you're trying to do, right? Even if it's just a very simple thing of like trying to walk across a room or trying to like grab at something, and maybe you have other things happening in the dream that are like startling to you or like preventing you from moving forward. This movie has that quality to it. Like, there were moments where I was watching this film and I was getting the same feeling that I get when I have these kinds of dreams, and it was like, yeah, I feel like I'm watching like someone's nightmare right now. And I thought it was really creative, and again, it wasn't something that I was really expecting going into the movie. And these are the moments in the film where I would say, like, again, that tension, that dread is really heightened. The cinematography here is beautiful. Tilman Singer is yet another one of these directors that comes in and just knows how to craft a shot. You have a lot of very beautiful shots of like the natural landscape around them. I will say, like, while I do think the images are beautiful, I didn't quite get the same sense of dread as I did when I was watching Longlegs. You know, and to be fair, these are two completely like different movies. I'm just comparing them because they're the most like recent Neon releases, and they do have elements that are very similar to each other. So that was like the one thing that I would have liked to seen a little bit more in this film, is a little bit more of that like atmosphere building. There's parts of this movie that take place within this hotel setting. Again, this is supposed to be a kind of like vacation resort type place, and it was kind of giving me like The Shining vibes. I was like, okay, great, creepy hotel location, we always love that. There were other parts where I was getting a lot of like David Lynch, like Lost Highway vibes. I kind of wish it maybe was playing with like visual symbolism a little bit more within its like locations to again heighten that sense of dread, heighten that sense of weirdness, again maybe give some more clues as to what the overall like themes of the film are trying to be. So a lot to admire about this film. Again, my biggest criticism here is with the narrative. I think the biggest thing that's lacking here is a clear character motivations, right? Why are the antagonists doing what they're doing, and why are they going about it this certain way? It's one of those things where it's like, I see what the writer and director is going for. He's giving you enough here that you can generally understand what's going on within this like vacation retreat. But again, my question kind of coming out of the film was, well, why? Like, why is any of this happening? What are you trying to say about this particular topic? And yes, I'm sure there were things that I missed in the film. I'm sure there were some like little explanations or bits of dialogue here and there. So it's definitely a film that I know I need to revisit, but I still feel like we were kind of just missing something within the motivations of the characters. And it's kind of hard to talk about without getting into spoilers. So I am going to talk about the ending. I am going to get into spoilers right now. So if you haven't seen the film, either click off or you can skip ahead. I will leave a timestamp somewhere down here where you can skip ahead to. But yes, there are spoilers coming right now. So at the end of the film, you basically find out that Dan Stevens has created this retreat in which he is luring these couples, essentially, or young women in, and he actually has this like medical facility in the back of this retreat where he does all of these weird scientific experiments, basically trying to, I believe, create this new species or breed of humans. It feels like a human like bird hybrid, right? Just because, again, the name Cuckoo, they very much refer to the cuckoo bird, and the aspect of the cuckoo bird in which the bird will lay eggs in the nest of another bird and then kind of go off and then leave like the other birds to come and raise its offspring. He's essentially doing something very similar in which he has young women that are coming to this vacation retreat, and he's using these monstrous creatures that he's already created to go and impregnate these women with eggs and then give birth to the next version of these kinds of human animal monster hybrids. So it's clear that that's what he's doing. But again, my question is like, why? Why is he so determined to create these kinds of hybrids? What is the purpose of them? What is he hoping to achieve? He does talk a lot about how, you know, there's like certain species of birds that need to be protected because they're going extinct. And so I was like, okay, are you trying to have like an environmental message here? But then it doesn't really seem like that's where the film's going. It kind of seems more like it's making a commentary on, again, just like women in general and kind of the assumption that we have in society as humans that women are, you know, meant to, I guess, be like the vessels of childbirth, right? That it's women's duties. It's in their like quote unquote nature to bear children, to give birth, to raise children. I don't know. I was kind of getting all of that, but again, I'm not really sure like what the film is trying to say about any of these themes. And again, I just don't understand what Dan Stevens' character's motivation was. Like, was this a thing where, you know, him and his wife were trying to like have a child and then something happened and they weren't able to, and so then he became obsessed with this idea of like creation and nature, and why do some genes get passed on and others don't? I don't really know. I feel like the film needed something like that so we could have like understood what his motivation was. And then I think knowing his motivation would have definitely helped clarify what the overall theme of the movie is supposed to be. You can be like weird but also have a clear themes and character motivations. I feel like a good recent example of that from this year is I Saw the TV Glow, which I'll be talking about in another video soon. And yes, I know that one is not strictly a horror film, but it does have horror elements to it, and it does have these very experimental elements to it. It is very weird, but I feel like that film is also very much grounded in a very clear like theme and very clear like character struggles, and you understand like why characters are acting like a certain way. So I guess that's like overall my thing with some of these neon films. You can say it for the A24 films as well. Like, I appreciate the cinematography, I appreciate the really great acting that we're getting from these films. I just wish the narratives were like on the same level as these other elements. One thing I will say about these films though is that they do feel very like current. And what I mean by that is that they do feel like films that very much embody just kind of these strange times that we're living in. I think one thing that's always fascinating about the horror genre, and one of the reasons why I love it, is kind of seeing how, you know, society's anxieties or fears of the day are reflected in horror films from specific decades. And I think what we have with films like Cuckoo or Longlegs, or films that have a very similar tone, is I think that they are tapping into just this like weirdness that we're experiencing, where it does feel like we're living in these very like strange different realities from each other, right? And I think that has a lot to do with like social media, the 24-hour news cycle, right? Just like the kind of media that we are consuming, and how depending on like what kind of media you're consuming, like you could have a very different understanding of the world than, you know, maybe your closest friend or maybe a family member, right? But I feel like we're all kind of living in this just like really strange time where I think we're all kind of questioning like what the hell is going on here? Like what is the truth? Like what is reality? We have instances of like weird or like violent things happening that like should be horrific and people should be freaking out about, but then you have certain segments of the population that are acting like things are completely normal. It's that feeling that I feel like these films really tap into. So all of that to say, like, I think these are going to be movies that are going to be really fascinating to look back on once we have some like distance from this weird period, and hopefully we will have distance from it soon. This film also really made me interested to go and see Tilman Singer's other work. I'm really curious to see his earlier films, just the build up to making something like Cuckoo. So even if these films are not like my favorites, what I really appreciate about them is that they are exposing us to these new kinds of filmmakers whose previous work I'm interested in checking out, and that's always a really like exciting feeling to kind of get to discover these new filmmakers. So those are my overall thoughts on Cuckoo. Let me know your thoughts on the film. What did you think about it? What did you take away from the story? What are your interpretations of what was happening? What did you like? What didn't you like? Let me know in the comments down below, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much for watching.